Good evening, and welcome to the Conservative Party of Canada's Leadership Debate. This is the second of our official debates and will be entirely in English. Our first debate, an all-French debate, took place here last night. I'm Lisa Raitt, and I'm joined by Dan Nolan. We are the co-chairs of the Leadership Election Organizing Committee and moderators for both official debates. Dan took the lead last night, and tonight I'm in charge. We're broadcasting live to you from Toronto. All right, let's begin. This is how the night will unfold. We will start with candidates providing opening remarks in an order predetermined by a random draw held last week. Each candidate will have 60 seconds. Now, we asked Canadians to submit video questions on any topic, and we received over 1,000 entries. Dan and I, as moderators, chose a cross-section of these questions, and these will be used for this debate. The candidates were not provided the questions, but they were given the general themes to be discussed. Following opening remarks, this debate will have two sections. The first half will be a face-to-face format. Two candidates will debate each other one-on-one. A new video question will be played for each face-to-face segment, and those two candidates will debate for 2 minutes after each one has had an opportunity to provide a short answer to the question. All candidates will be given the opportunity to debate each of their fellow candidates once. The second half of the debate will be video questions posed to all candidates. Each will have 2 minutes to answer the question. We will then open the floor to an all candidates debate for 5 minutes. The debate will be approximately 2 hours in length in order to provide all candidates a reasonable chance to speak to you, Conservative Party members, and all Canadians. Now, before we welcome the candidates, we want you to know that the Conservative Party has taken all precautions regarding the group gathering restrictions here in Toronto today. As such, we only have 10 people in this room, and you will see that the candidates are stationed at podiums that allow for the required physical distancing between them. And I would note that if we were in the 2017 leadership race with 14 candidates, we probably would have had to rent out Scotiabank Arena to accomplish this. And now we'd like to present to you the 2020 leadership candidates. Mr. Aaron O'Toole. Mr. Peter MacKay. Mr. Derek Sloan. And Dr. Leslyn Lewis. Welcome to you all candidates. Let's begin. We'll start with the opening remarks from each candidate, proceeding in the podium order. Mr. O'Toole, you have 60 seconds.
I've been talking to Conservatives about the future of Canada. From my launch in Calgary, where empty office towers serve as monuments to Western alienation, to BC and Atlantic Canada, where lumber mills are closing, to Ontario, where companies like GM are leaving town. Working families across the country were already being left behind by the Liberals, and then COVID-19 hit. Across Canada, people have been losing their jobs, their homes, and their hope. More than ever before, Canada needs a strong Conservative government. We need a principled leader who will unite our party by respecting all Conservatives. A leader who can show more urban and suburban Canadians that their values of liberty, family, and equality are at the core of our party. That's what I've done to win my suburban Toronto seat 3 times. It's time for a true blue Conservative who can win the next election and get our country back on track.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. MacKay, you have 60 seconds.
I'm a proud Canadian, a proud Conservative. Yet under the Liberal government, we are less prosperous, more in debt, and more divided as a nation than we have been in the last 5 years. Our government has taken, our party has taken steps to preserve democracy and the rule of law. Canada cannot afford another term of Justin Trudeau. I believe in our party and, of course, Canada, and that our best days are ahead. There are no obstacles we cannot overcome, including COVID-19. We will only win if we are united as a party. And when we reach out to every part of Canada and offer Conservative solutions and ideas. Our caucus has supported me in overwhelming numbers. And as a leader, I will bring our party together. I'm supported by Conservatives across the country, social Conservatives, fiscal Conservatives, new voters, new Canadians, en anglais et en français. We need a leader who attacks Liberals, not Conservatives. I will unite the party as I did before with Stephen Harper. I will defeat Justin Trudeau, and I will bring us back to form a national Conservative majority government.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan, you have 60 seconds.
It is a privilege and an honor to be here tonight representing the founding political party of this great nation. We are facing a divide and divisions here in Canada, whether they be racial, regional, like Western alienation, and even class-based resentment. I stand before you tonight and give you my solemn promise that I will never compromise on Conservative values. I will never sell out Canada, and I will always put Canadians first. I will never give an inch to political correctness. I won't cede an ounce of our sovereignty to international organizations. I'm the only candidate that is committed to defunding the World Health Organization and getting Canada out of the Paris Agreement. I will never put the rich elite and international corporations before the Canadian worker and small business. I will do whatever it takes to make the West an equal partner in Confederation. This is my unyielding promise to you. If you want a Conservative without apology to lead your party, tonight I ask for your support in your vote. God bless you and God bless Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Dr. Lewis, you have 60 seconds.
Canada is at a crossroads. If the Liberals win the next election, it will be decades before we can recover. I am the right leader with the right policies at the right time. I am the leader that can withstand the Liberal attacks and the lies about who we are as Canadians. We are a good people. To win the next election, we are going to need somebody to lead with courage, compassion, and common sense. The courage to stand up to Trudeau and defend what is right over what is easy. The compassion to have policies that uplift our country and not just a select few. And good common sense fiscal policies. I ran my campaign based on these principles of courage, compassion, and common sense. And with your help and support, that is exactly how I will run this country and this nation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Thank you, candidates. And now we will begin the face-to-face portion of the debate. Now, before we begin, we do have 4 candidates this evening who are all experienced in advocating within a set period of time, either in Parliament or before the courts. I also know that these candidates not only want their submissions to be heard by Canadians, but they'd also like to have their opponents' submissions heard by Canadians as well. So with that, if it becomes apparent to me that your message isn't getting through clearly, I will gently intervene and ask that you re-engage in a way that allows for the viewer to understand your points that are being made. You got it? Excellent. With the first question, it will be posed to Aaron O'Toole and Peter McKay.
Hi, my name is Mona Patel. I am from Niagara Falls, and I am a proud legal gun owner.
Hi, I'm Crystal Caputo. I'm from Niagara Falls, and I'm a French Catholic Serbian Canadian.
Hi, my name is Jordan Williams. I'm from Niagara-on-the-Lake. I'm a proud LGBT entrepreneur.
Hi, I'm Jackie Seaver. I'm a single mother of a university student from Niagara Falls.
And our question today is, if elected leader, how do each of the candidates plan to show Canadians
that the Conservative Party is inclusive
in order to sway enough middle ground voters
to win us a majority government?
Thank you.
Mr. O'Toole, please start us off. You have 30 seconds.
Great question, Mona, Crystal, Jordan, and Jackie. That is exactly what I've been doing when I've won my seat in the GTA 3 times, bringing together people based on a conservative approach, liberty, opportunity for all. I would be our first leader from the GTA. I've done this in 3 elections. I will do it again. Prime Minister Trudeau has been attacking many Canadians in the suburbs and cities of the country. We need to unite them in our cause to take back Canada.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. McKay, please go ahead, 30 seconds.
It is an excellent question, and unity has been at the core of my campaign. I've been a person who's dedicated much of my working life to this party. I helped with Stephen Harper and with thousands of Conservatives to bring the Conservative movement together. But to truly reach out to Canadians, we are going to have to modernize. We are going to have to present ideas, solutions, policies that are relevant in people's backyards and back pockets. And that's what I've been talking about. An 8-point jobs plan for Canada. Sensible, thoughtful policies that will improve people's lives. Not vanity projects, not dividing Canadians the way Justin Trudeau has, but getting things done for Canadians. And that's what's needed post-COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. The floor is now open for 2 minutes, and we'll let Mr. O'Toole start.
Thank you. I think our 4 questioners tonight reflect a good cross-section of Conservative aspirations for the future of our country. Our next leader needs to unite all Conservatives. All voices in our party are welcome. If we don't unite first as a party, how do we expect to bring people in the suburbs of Southern Ontario and the lower mainland of BC, first and second generation Canadians, to join our mission for a more competitive Canada, a more free, more opportunity? We have to reach out by uniting our party first. Mr. McKay started this campaign by dividing the party. We have to unite. That is what I will bring as leader. I also have experience winning where we need to win in the Greater Toronto Area, and my experience in the private sector and uniform makes sure I will roll up our sleeves, rebuild Canada and our place in the world.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. McKay.
Of course, I've only focused on bringing Conservatives together. That's what I've done since my earliest days, back in 1997, when I first left the prosecutor's office to join the Conservative Party in that election. And I've worked with Stephen Harper, I've worked with social Conservatives, fiscal Conservatives, across the spectrum. In fact, I don't speak of true blue, I speak of everyone when I speak of the Conservative Party. No hyphenated Conservatives. Let's all get behind a Conservative plan and a leader who can win. I come from Atlantic Canada. I've been living here in the GTA with my family. I've worked and lived in many parts of Canada. And what I hear often is that we need to get the party together in order to keep the country together. It's that serious. We need to ensure that we're going to be united as a movement, and I can lead now as I have in the past.
Justin
and it's
Trudeau
not just about being in the House of Commons.
It's suppressed
about
Mr. O'Toole, I'm going to let
Mr.
Mr. O'Toole go, and then
Justin
Mr.
Trudeau
McKay.
has been suppressing democracy. He's spending $250 billion. There's no accountability. We know with the Liberals what happens, corruption. Parliament will reconvene in September. I will be a leader to hold him to account.
Okay. Last 10 seconds to Mr. McKay.
Win in Southern Ontario and in BC and
I remember
unite
being in the
party.
House of Commons when the entire sponsorship scandal broke, and we pushed on the government to be accountable. And we need to do that again when we have a parliament again, which Mr. Trudeau has shut down, unfortunately.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. The second question will be posed to Mr. Sloan and Dr. Lewis.
Hello, candidates. My name is Joseph, and I live in the riding of Milton. If elected leader, what will you do to ensure that social conservatives are able to play an active role in the future of the Conservative Party of Canada?
Lovely riding of Milton. Mr. Sloan, please start us off, 30 seconds.
Sure. Well, social conservative issues are policy that affect families, seniors, and children. And we can't be afraid to address values. The Liberals are so radically far to the left in their ideas when it comes to conversion therapy and abortion that we can gain ground on these ideas. Many new Canadians are social conservatives. They don't believe that there's 72 or 102 genders. They don't want their kids to be confused. And remember, Stephen Harper, when he cut funding for foreign abortions, we won a majority after that. When Doug Ford campaigned against the sex ed curriculum, we won here in Ontario. So we can take principled stances and we can win.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Dr. Lewis.
Social conservatism is a very, very important part of our party. And one of the reasons why I decided to run is because I saw the divide within our party. I saw that there was a potential that social conservatives would be ousted from the party. And I think it's very important that we recognize that people with traditional values, people with religious values, that all of these parts are important to our great democracy. And that is what I would do, is uphold all of these values within our party.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Now the floor is open for 2 minutes. Mr. Sloan, if you could begin.
Well, I don't think we're going to be arguing too much here, Leslyn, but I think it's important to recognize that there is a lot of agreement within the party. Behind the scenes, even my two friends over here, Peter McKay and Aaron O'Toole, would agree with me that it's not right that Canada doesn't have any laws when it comes to abortion, for instance. It is out of whack. It's out of whack with other developed nations. It's out of whack with most of the developed world. And, you know, we can kid ourselves and say, well, you know, if we talk about that, we're gonna lose. Everything the Liberals campaign on is divisive. We can't ignore division. We
Dr.
don't go
Lewis?
looking for it. I'm sorry.
Social conservatism has a wide perspective, wide variety of people. My platform is based on 4 pillars: upholding parental authority, upholding democratic rights, compassion for the vulnerable, fiscal responsibility. Parents have the right to govern their children and to raise their children in accordance with their values. And the cornerstone is, the family is the cornerstone and the bedrock of our society. I believe that we should even have a parental rights bill so that parents can uphold the rights of their children across this country, even in our school systems. This
Mr.
is such...
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Leslie. You know, and there's so many ways the Liberals have gone just so far to the left. And a good example of that is Bill C-8. And this is a bill that will take a parent and potentially jail them if they want to get their child who's experiencing gender dysphoria, gender-affirming counseling. I mean, these are things that... you know, kids go through a lot of different things, and we know that most kids that go through gender dysphoria will grow out of it. We shouldn't be
Last 10
rolling the
seconds to
dice on
Dr.
this
Lewis.
for kids.
Go ahead, Dr. Lewis.
But the issue is that it's still parental authority, that a parent could be jailed, or even a pastor could be jailed for having these normal discussions with children. We should allow children to just be children.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We're going to move on to question number 3.
Hello, my name is Michelle, and I'm from Hamilton East Stony Creek. My question for the candidates is, how can we develop our environmental stewardship while economically developing our oil, gas, and natural resources? Thank you for letting me ask this question. Have a good day.
Dr. Lewis, over to you for 30 seconds, please.
My plan is to develop our natural resources in an environmentally sustainable manner, and I have 4 policies to do that. The first is to incentivize corporations, then to bring in balanced regulation, and also to clean up the orphan wells, and also to adopt a national environmental policy. My policy is to make sure that all Canadians have clean air, clean water, and live on uncontaminated soil.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Mr. O'Toole.
This is a great question. We have to have the right balance. Let me be clear. I will kill the carbon tax, get pipelines built, and win the next election with a real environmental plan. These are 3 things that Mr. McKay cannot do. Justin Trudeau is making us less competitive, and he's dictating an Ottawa knows best approach to the provinces. What Premier Kenney or Premier Ford is doing to lower emissions, we should respect and support. My Our Country plan has a Rebuild Canada section that will get us back on track and help the environment.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. The floor is now open for 2 minutes. Dr. Lewis, if you'd begin.
My policy incentivizes companies to develop innovative technologies, and these technologies will uplift our environment and our economy simultaneously. I will make sure that we develop our economy and our environment without foreign interference. We will stimulate corporations by having them invest in innovative technologies, which means bringing in tax credits. We will sell our liquefied natural gas abroad to bring down emissions in places like China, who's still dependent upon coal. We will reduce regulation and create simplified procedures.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Thank you. I'm going to move
Eliminate
over to
the
Mr.
carbon
O'Toole.
tax.
We'll come back to you for last 10.
And I agree entirely with Dr. Lewis. There's a number of amazing Canadian technologies we can use. Nuclear power, carbon capture and sequestration. Our LNG can shift coal emissions overseas. So I support that. There are 70,000 jobs in nuclear alone. I've been a supporter of that since I was first elected. I also have proposed a Strategic National Pipelines Act that will make Cabinet the decision maker so that projects can get going. Justin Trudeau has taken an ideological approach. He killed Energy East. He killed Northern Gateway, a pipeline one-third owned by Indigenous Canadians, and then he had to buy the remaining pipeline. We need to make it a cabinet decision, and a Prime Minister, I will show the country that pipelines are in the national interest, from Newfoundland and Labrador to British Columbia.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Dr. Lewis?
I will make sure that we have enabling legislation. We have had legislation that has targeted provinces like Alberta. Bill C-68, Bill C-48, and Bill C-69 has eliminated our oil and gas sector.
Thank you very much. We will move on to the fourth question, which will be posed to Mr. McKay and to Mr. Sloan.
Hi, I'm Sierra Bird, and I'm the Conservative Party candidate of record for Churchill, Kuwait, Nagaski. The Liberals have done nothing to help Indigenous people over the last 5 years. That is why it is imperative that the next leader of our party has the ability to build strong and trusting relationships with Indigenous Canadians. As leader and Prime Minister, what would your plan be to tackle issues such as clean drinking water, rural connectivity, and mental health services? Thank you.
Mr. McKay, we'll begin with you.
Siri, thank you. First thing, we'd like you to run again. And that's also something that we need to do, is include people in every institution, in every part of the country. There should be no barriers. And that is particularly true of the largest and fastest growing population in Canada, which is our First Nations. Yes, we need to ensure clean water on reserve and off reserve. We need to ensure that people have basic rights to opportunity, basic rights to work. I agree with Mr. O'Toole. We should have national pipelines and partner with our First Nations in real ways. And so there are many steps that we can take. Mr. Trudeau has failed miserably when it comes to our First Nations.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan, please go ahead, 30 seconds.
Well, I agree. I think that clean water supplies on reserve should be a #1 priority. I also believe that, bringing an end to these boil water advisories needs to be at the top of our list. Another thing that I think we need to do is there were some laws that were controversial that Stephen Harper brought in, the Transparency Act that he brought in. The Transparency Act, where we see where money is going, helps more money get to where it needs to go on the bans, and that is also a priority for me. And I'll just leave it at that for now. My time's almost up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sloan. The floor is open for 2 minutes. Mr. McKay, please go ahead.
I think working in real partnership and working towards reconciliation, which goes on. I'm proud of the work that we did as a government, where we worked to raise the rights of property rights for women on reserve, our First Nations. We worked to bring about transparency, as Mr. Sloan said. That was an important part of ensuring that programs were working. I was proud of the work that we did on the Victims' Bill of Rights, to address issues on reserve of violence and education. It means, of course, working directly with First Nations and listening to them, hearing their thoughts, their input, and their progress and dreams and aspirations. It is a priority for us as a country to move forward on this file. It is an important engagement that we need to continue in meaningful ways that get results.
Mr.
Yes
Sloan.
to water, yes to jobs.
Mr. Sloan.
We also need to make a clear path for resource development that will benefit reserves. And we need to allow First Nations to be able to say yes to energy projects that will bring prosperity to their communities. And so that's why I'm against the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I think that it will add additional complexity to approving these projects. And these projects bring the lifeblood of money and jobs into these communities.
Justice and accountability and transparency are things that we all want in our life. As proof that the failure of this government, we saw the blockades. We want to see projects, meaningful projects that include and offer the opportunities to our First Nations. Having a First Nations Transparency Act helps in that pursuit. I've reached out to members of the First Nations community. I had 2 communities in my constituency in Nova Scotia, and we saw the progress that can be made on real projects that matter, that lift up the entire First Nations people.
The UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, it does not respect provincial authority. And we saw its principles at play with the Coastal GasLink blockage in northern BC. This is what we will see over and over again if we enact legislation based on that document into law. And I will always fight against it, and I hope Mr. McKay would as well.
Our First Nations Rangers program is a perfect example of the incredible contributions made to this country by our First Nations. I would like to see that program enhanced.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. The 5th question will be posed to Mr. O'Toole and Mr. Sloan.
Hi, Conservative candidates. My name is Danju. I'm from Calgary. My question to you is, what is your plan to bring back supply chain to Canada? How do you want to create jobs for our young generation?
Mr. O'Toole, please start us off, 30 seconds.
Thank you very much, Danju, for the question. Justin Trudeau was late on our border and late with the economic response. And we've seen just how far behind Canada's been. No wonder he's suppressing Parliament. He doesn't want his record examined. In my Our Country platform, I have a detailed program on being self-sufficient in PPE, in critical security supplies, in food security. We need to make sure that we also have free trade amongst free countries and address the Communist Party of China.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. Sloan.
COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of Canada having a reliable and trustworthy supply chain for our personal protective equipment and our ICU ventilators and other important things that we need. It also highlights a broader issue of how can we make more things in Canada? How can we rely less on the Communist Party of China? And how can we enhance our own industries here in Canada? So yes, I would absolutely be in favor of bringing our critical supply chains back to Canada. But beyond that, we need to do more manufacturing, and made in Canada is always best for Canada.
The floor is open for 2 minutes. Mr. O'Toole, please.
Thank you. Justin Trudeau is losing UN bids, upsetting our allies around the country, and we're not at the table. The UK, Australia, and New Zealand are forging a free trade pact. I've been advocating for CANZUK for many years. This would allow free trade amongst our allies, amongst free countries. The Communist Party of China has manipulated world trade on steel and aluminum. The Trudeau government missed that as well. 2 years ago, I asked Justin Trudeau in the House about the Communist Party manipulation of the World Health Organization. The Trudeau government's left Canada unprepared. We need to get serious, work with our allies, and be more self-reliant, self-sufficient. I worked on trade in the private sector, in the Harper government. I'm ready to do this. Our Country platform has a Rebuilding Canada, restoring our reputation, and having real help for families and seniors.
Mr. Sloan?
It's the plan for the future.
Mr. Sloan?
Consumers in Canada, the US, and elsewhere have effectively financed Communist China's ability to buy up our natural resource companies. But this is not something that we should be doing, and I have been clear that I would ban any company that is a state-owned enterprise or affiliated with the Communist Party of China from buying up our natural resource companies or land. This is something that's very important. And also, we have companies that have set up factories in China and are stealing our intellectual property here in Canada. These are very important issues.
And on that note, the Chinese state enterprise Huawei got its start in Canada under Mr. McKay's watch. They started when he was in head of the Canadian Securities Agency. They got their foothold into 4G under rules that he approved. So now we have a state-owned enterprise trying to get into our critical infrastructure. For 4 years, I've been against Huawei being part of our 5G. We need to make sure our secure infrastructure is protected.
And I agree. I'm also against Huawei building our 5G network, and I would certainly not approve that as leader of the party.
Thank you very much. The sixth question will be posed to Mr. McKay and Dr. Lewis.
My name is Lisa Poole, and I'm from Calgary. Over 1 million Canadians are impacted by dementia, and evidenced by COVID-19, we're failing many of them. If you're elected leader of the Conservative Party, do you support the creation of an all-party dementia caucus? Thank you.
Now, before I turn to the candidates, we've had many questions on this theme, and it's no secret that I have an interest in this topic as well. I ask you not only to answer Lisa's specific question, but also speak to the broader issue that's been brought to our attention through our video submissions of an aging population, of seniors, and the National Dementia Strategy. And I'll start with Mr. McKay.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Lisa. There's no question that there is tremendous vulnerability in our country when it comes to seniors and when it comes to the issue of dementia that touches people in a very personal way. I want to give seniors every opportunity to stay in their own homes as long as possible. I want to give more access to the health care in the home, which is an important change. I want to be able to see seniors have tax deductions to make the changes necessary to remain in their homes and give more access to the home care that they need when they need it most. These are the changes that I would bring forward.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Dr. Lewis.
Yes, thank you for this question. It is very important that a government provides safety and security for all its citizens, especially the most vulnerable. And this includes our seniors and people suffering with dementia and other diseases. In the recent times, we've seen what has happened to seniors, and we've seen the substandard conditions that they've been living under, and it's just heartbreaking. I would dedicate policies to making sure that seniors and people living with disabilities are respected.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Now we'll open it up to the floor for 2 minutes.
I
Mr.
very
McKay.
much associate with what Dr. Lewis has said in terms of the respect that should be afforded to the people who have contributed so much to this country. And I would go about that by enhancing the disability tax credit as one method to do so. And this, of course, all has to be coordinated through our provinces with their responsibility for health care. Improving the health care and improving the home care is the way to go about this, and reducing the cost of hospital and institutionalized care. Those are the type of changes, I think, that give health care a bigger impact.
And for people who've dedicated their entire lives, they should be able to live with dignity. And I believe that we should be able to have policies that improve senior care, that allow seniors to remain in their homes for a longer time, increasing the tax deduction so that they can modify their homes, and also increasing the penalties for people who neglect seniors and who mistreat seniors. We should also have home care services and make sure that we fund those home care services so that seniors can be in their homes for longer periods of time. We also need to increase palliative care and long-term care and foster a culture of respect in this country for the aged.
Thank you, Dr.
I
Lewis.
believe as well in all of those substantive steps and more. One of the more shocking things that we've seen during COVID-19 was the report that came from the Canadian Armed Forces about the conditions that were found in long-term healthcare facilities, both private and in the public sector. And that has to be addressed in meaningful ways. And yes, more accountability. As a former prosecutor, as a former Attorney General and Justice Minister, people who are deliberately neglectful or even allow those conditions to exist have to be held to account. But it really is about allowing seniors to have more access to their own funding and to support them in meaningful ways.
There's so many things that we could do at the federal level. We could even change building codes to make sure that the residents have more ventilation. We also need to make sure that we do not impose euthanasia on these seniors, because some of them feel compelled to just relieve suffering from the system and from their family members. And we need to make sure that we support them.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. I appreciate that. And that concludes the face-to-face section of our debate. Thank you, all candidates. And at this point, we're going to turn to the second half of the debate, where all the candidates will be given the opportunity to address each question posed. And you will have 2 minutes to initially address it, and after that will be a 5-minute period of spirited yet civil debate. Question 7.
Hi, my name is Max, and today I want you to explain why you want to be the Prime Minister of Canada.
Thank you very much, Max. We appreciate the question. Mr. O'Toole, please go ahead. Tell Max why you want to be Prime Minister.
Well, thanks, Max, and hopefully you might become Prime Minister one day. Max, it's simple. I'm a patriot. I love this country. It bubbles through my blood. That's why I joined the military when I graduated from high school, and it's why I'm so proud now to represent my hometown in Parliament as a Member of Parliament. We are the greatest country in the world, but it's up to us to make sure we preserve it for your generation. I'm very worried with what Mr. Trudeau has done. He's saddling your generation with billions upon billions of debt and less opportunities. And this was before COVID-19 hit. So Max, I'm empowered by your generation and my son Jack, who's about your age, and my daughter Molly. We owe it to them, everyone here on this stage, to give them the same opportunities in Canada that we had when we were growing up and we were your age. That's why I'm running. Last night, Mr. McKay suggested I'm angry. I am a bit angry with what Justin Trudeau has done to this country. In the Conservative government, when we lost in 2015, we had high national unity numbers. We had a balanced budget. We had low taxes. We had investment and jobs for your parents, for everyone. All that is gone. The separatist Bloc Québécois is back in 3rd place in the House of Commons. There's anger in the West and people even talking about separation. We're weaker, we're poorer, and less respected around the world. So that's what empowers me, Max. I want to make sure we remain the greatest country in the world, just as Sir John A. Macdonald said over a century ago. That's why in my Our Country platform, I have a very detailed plan to rebuild Canada after COVID-19, to restore our reputation on the world stage, and to provide real help for families and seniors, many of whom have been left behind by Trudeau, as he is spending billions. So Max, I hope to see you on the campaign trail soon.
Mr. McKay, please go ahead. You have 2 minutes to give Max his answer.
Thanks, Max. And the short answer is for you and for your generation, for my children, and those who come to Canada to find a new way of life, those who experience Canada in a way that they can't experience in their country of origin. We have, as Mr. O'Toole said, the greatest country in the world, but we can't take it for granted. And I share the concerns of all of the candidates here for the direction that Justin Trudeau has taken our country. We are more divided. We are turning on one another in terms of regions, people, places. We have to get back to the basics of addressing the priorities of this nation, ensuring that there will be jobs for you in the future, Max, ensuring that you're going to have access to education, healthcare. You're going to be able to grow up and live out your dreams as a Canadian. And one thing that will hinder us in that pursuit as Conservatives is when we turn on one another. Max, I don't know if you play hockey or soccer, but we know that the principle is to pass to one another, is to be on the same side, is to pursue a goal. We're not going to be able to do that if we turn on one another. Conservatives can build this country as we have in the past and as we will again. And yes, it goes back to some of those fundamental principles of being honest with one another, finding real solutions that are going to make a difference in your life, in your parents' life, maybe your siblings. We've got to continue to keep the focus away from what divides us and focus on what makes us strong. Canada has been gifted with resources. We have been gifted with people, with freedoms, with liberties, and we need to protect those and enhance them and continue to grow this country for the opportunities of you and your generation. We are certainly a country that is admired around the world, even with the setback that came under Justin Trudeau's leadership, or lack thereof, of pursuing this UN Council seat and neglecting the more important task of building our economy. I have an 8-point plan directly aimed at how we get our country moving again, get us back on track, make us competitive, make our country strong.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan, it's your turn to tell Max why you want to be Prime Minister.
Thank you for that question, Max. And we live in a very interesting time, and like all Conservatives, I am very optimistic about the future, but I'm also concerned about some things that I'm seeing here presently. And we have so many things that are going on right now. We've just come out of the worst pandemic that we've seen in our lifetime. We see a resurgent China. We see a crackdown on free speech. We see a cancel culture that exists in the world of political correctness. It also exists on social media, where we have banning and shadow banning and algorithms that lead people in certain ways in some of our biggest search engines. These are things that are scary and that need to be addressed. And I believe that Canada can be the country in the world with the highest standard of living, the lowest tax rates, the healthiest citizenry. These are the things that we need to focus on and move towards. We can't do that when our energy industry and our natural resources are underwater. We must get out of the sovereignty-destroying agreements that we've signed. No to the Paris Agreement. We have to get out of that. We have to get rid of Justin Trudeau's bills, Bill C-69 and C-48. We have to be strong on free speech. That's why I will get rid of Bill C-16. That's why I will always promote a culture of freedom. And I denounce the council culture that we see. Sometimes we see it in our own party, unfortunately. We saw some candidates that were disqualified in this leadership race. We need everybody to be all hands on deck, whether they be social conservatives or any other conservative. We need to have one big happy party that's moving together, that's moving as a team. And I am confident that we can achieve that. I'm confident that we can do that. But we have to address some of the controversial issues that the Liberals like to traffic in. And those are the ways, without dealing with those, we can't move forward. But when we do, I know that the best days of this country are yet ahead of us.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And Dr. Lewis, it's your last pitch to Max as to why you want to be Prime Minister.
Max, I believe that the children are the future. We need to just teach them well and let them lead the way. I want to be Prime Minister because I want the country that I grew up in to be here for my children. And I was very concerned in the last few years, the last 5 years, I've seen this country take a turn. I've seen the diminishment of the Canadian dream, Max, and I want that dream for you. I want you to have a future that I had, Max. I am proud to be a Canadian. Max, I'm concerned when I see people telling Canadians that they should not be proud. I want you to be proud of your country, Max. Max, the fabric of our nation is just being torn apart. And even provinces are threatening to leave our great confederation. Debt is piling up. That debt you will be responsible for, Max. And I want to make sure that we take responsible steps so that you have a bright future, the same way that I have a bright future. And so that, Max, you could have the dream of one day standing here and one day potentially running to be the Prime Minister of this country. And in order for that to happen, Max, we need to make sure that we have strong economic policies, that we care about our vulnerable, that we protect our children, that we maintain our environment, and that we create a strong future for children like yourself, Max, because you are our future, and your life and your progress and your health and your well-being is important to us.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Candidates, you're being so good at keeping to time. We actually have a little bit of extra time, so we're going to have 7-minute debate, and I'm going to be a little bit more hands-off, and I'll let you have a little bit more room to have pointed discussions with each other on the topic of why you want to be Prime Minister. So with that, I'm going to start off with Mr. O'Toole and let it go.
Thank you very much, Max. A few weeks ago, I was in the House of Commons and I asked the government to give some support to seniors, a one-time boost to the old age security. And then a few weeks later, they did that. Seniors had been struggling in COVID-19 like many Canadians have. It shows, Max, why an opposition is so important and why I'm so proud of my colleagues in the trenches holding the government to account. In fact, we fixed the wage subsidy and certain things to save jobs. Maybe your mom or dad's job, we made sure it was a higher amount. We were pushing for more support from small and medium-sized businesses. The government didn't listen, unfortunately. We also asked them to close the border in January so we would prevent cases from coming into Canada, and the Trudeau government didn't listen. So our democracy has been suppressed because the Trudeau government doesn't want to be held to account. I'm very proud that I've been pushing on a number of these measures as an MP, both in the House and on the campaign trail, and my Our Country platform has a Rebuild Canada plan. It will restore our reputation, and it will provide real help for families and seniors like we were able to do by advocating for the OAS for your grandparents, Max. That's what our democracy is about. And I'm very proud to have worked with my colleagues in the last few years to hold Mr. Trudeau to account. I'm ready to beat him in September, and that's what this race is really about.
It is about that, and it is about pressing the government, and it's incredible what you can do when you get to the Parliament of Canada. And these candidates here obviously are all talking about important ideas that affect you, Max, that affect Canadians, and that affect the world, frankly. But there is nothing like being in government and having the opportunity to bring those policies and bring those laws forward and to make the changes that we need to improve the lives of Canadians. Having spent time at the cabinet table when we went through the last recession in 2008 and 2009, we entered it with a balanced budget. And we came out stronger. Yes, we had to do stimulus spending, but there was oversight. There was a responsible parliament that was watching these plans. And then quickly we re-emerged stronger than any other country in the world. We were able to get Canadians back to work. We were able to build our country up again, use our natural resources to our advantage while respecting the environment, while doing so and setting world standards, reaching out to other countries that needed our help, responding to Haiti, building up our Canadian Armed Forces, who have been a bastion for hope and security and freedom around the world. What we did in Afghanistan is breathtaking. Our men and women in uniform were liberators. They went there, and under their protection, we were able to build schools, vaccinate children, leave the place better than we found it. And we can do the same for our country. When in government, we want to leave it better for you, better for your parents, and better for your entire generation. As Dr. Lewis said, we want this country to be a place that you can be proud of, the way we are proud of this country.
Max, it is also so important, Max, that your parents have authority to raise you in accordance with their values and their beliefs, Max, because they're the ones that are pushing you through life. Governments do not love children, Max. Parents love children, and as such, government should not interfere with your parents' authority to make sure that they give you the best life. In addition, Max, we are seeing our democracy just being undermined, our democratic values. Max, I will uphold fundamental principles, your freedom of religion, your freedom of belief, your freedom of conscience, and your freedom of association. Max, I believe that as a government official, we are elected to serve you, Max, and I will make sure that we will always respect your rights. We also have to be compassionate because one day, Max, your parents are going to be elderly and they are going to be in a position where they may not be able to take care of themselves. And we have to value the contribution that they have made to our society. And we must take care of our vulnerable, including even the environment, Max, because the environment is something that we have to sustain for your generation and generations to come.
I agree with you, Dr. Lewis, and I just would like to add that one thing that's important to me, Max, is the way in which we're selling out Canada piece by piece. And one important issue that I believe resonates in the GTA and other areas is the degree to which our housing values have exploded over the last years and essentially decade. And for me, we've taken a look at the numbers and we've seen that our immigration levels in this country are actually higher than the average for developed nations. We've taken a look at the number of new Canadians that are settling in the GTA. We're seeing that the supply and the demand are out of whack when it comes to new housing units that come onto the market. So we've taken a look at that and we've said we should reduce the number of immigrants so that we can have housing that is affordable. Without affordable housing, we can't live and work and enjoy life as it was meant to be. And one other thing I'll mention just quickly is the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is selling out our oil and gas industry. It has an aspirational goal of net zero by 2050, by the second half of this century. That means an aspirational goal of shutting down our energy sector. We cannot do that. And I ask these other candidates here tonight to agree with me on
I'm
that.
very concerned about your generation being saddled with debt. I think it's irresponsible for government to saddle future generations with debt. And that's why, Max, it is very important for us to have strong fiscal policies. My policies will make sure that future generations like yourself are not indebted, Max, so that you have a fair opportunity and so that you can have the same chance to succeed that I've had to succeed, Max.
And part of those chances, Max, will be technology and the jobs of the future. And you are part of a generation that will be the most educated, that will have the world in the palm of your hand. But that's also a challenge because there's vulnerabilities because of new technology. And we need to ensure that there is broadband internet available in every part of this country, every community. But we also need to be careful of the vulnerabilities that this creates. I know that you probably enjoy playing those games sometimes and being online, but let's be careful of the vulnerability. Because of the new free trade agreement, there is new vulnerabilities
This
created.
week, my son was more excited about the launch of the new Fortnite season than his schoolwork, like many families. That's why in my plan, I have some real help for families. We need to make sure that more childcare expenses are deductible. Parents need to have the ability to juggle the family, which is critical, and the ability to work and provide for it. And as Derek said, particularly in some of the suburban and urban communities, that's expensive. That's why with real help, more support for parents, allowing them to work and provide for their families is at the core of my plan.
Well, Max, I hope you got an answer to your question tonight from our candidates. We're going to go to question number 8, please.
Hi, my name is Jesus, and I'm from Ottawa, Ontario. My question is, what are your thoughts on systemic racism, and how would you demonstrate leadership in that area?
Mr. McKay, you have 2 minutes.
I think we have to acknowledge that systemic racism exists. It exists in our institutions. It exists in our communities across this country. I grew up in a small town in New Glasgow that has the shame of having excluded Viola Desmond from a theater. And this was an issue that I was always aware of my entire life. And so one of the most important things I think we have to do, Jesus, is listen. And listen to people who have the experience, who have lived it, and go about ways making a real effort in education, in the way that we address these issues of opportunity and remove the barriers. It really is the action time. It's the action time to get things done. It's the action time as well to respect the views of everybody on how we build a country that is more inclusive. We have an incredible reputation for having opened our doors and opened the opportunities, but we still have systemic racism when it comes to our First Nations. when it comes to the challenges that they still face and the exclusion that they still feel. We have lessons that can be taught at home, in our schools, in the public square, in this debate. And so it is the action part. We have a prime minister who did blackface. He's not well situated to lead the country in a way that is going to address these issues in a real way. It has to go well beyond the symbols. We need action on respectful discussions around policing. Having more members of our visible minority community, our cultural communities, represented in the institutions is what I believe will not only symbolize progress, but will bring about the progress, because there will be greater discussion and decision-making in the halls of justice, in the halls of business, in the halls of government, and in our institutions. We have to continue to invest in ensuring that we have better mental health outcomes for those who also are discriminated against. We need to ensure that people are not subject to abuse because of their place of origin or because of their belief. There are many things that we can do and continue to do, and having an honest and sometimes awkward discussion is part of those steps.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan, 2 minutes.
Canada has made mistakes in the past, but it is also an open country, it is a diverse country, and it always strives, in my view, to be the best that it can be. I believe that we do have problems with racism in Canada, and that we have people who are racist in Canada, like many countries do, like all countries do. But I don't believe that we should call Canada a racist country. I believe that Canada is a beacon of light and liberty across this nation, and that we have many things that we can do to improve, but there's many things that we've done that other countries look up to us for. I'll raise an issue that I believe is important, and we do have a form of systemic racism in Canada, and it is the law Bill 21 that we have in Quebec. It is a violation of minority rights. It treats people who are observant, Jews and Sikhs and others, in a way differently than it does people who are not. I believe that's an issue, and I know that we don't like to talk about it. We feel that it will hurt us in Quebec, and I obviously respect provincial jurisdiction, but this bill is not right, and I'm against it. And I believe that there are other ways that we can work together to preserve Quebec's unique culture. And I call on the other candidates tonight to make a statement on this bill, as I believe it's important. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. So racism and discrimination exists in every society, and unfortunately, Canada is no exception. But we have to distinguish between individual racism and systemic racism. Many people respond to the question of systemic racism by saying, I'm not a racist. That is individual racism. That shows evil intent. So systemic racism, we have to understand, is something very different. It deals with outcomes that are negative. And so when we look at the system, we can assess and we can say that we have had residential schools in Canada, and that has led to a negative outcome. We can say that there are different outcomes in the educational system, and those can be tied with race. We know that there are different outcomes in the criminal justice system. If we take, for example, even a First Nations person, a First Nations person charged with the same crime as a non-First Nations is more likely to be found guilty of that crime. Is more likely to be charged. When charged, higher conviction rate. When convicted, higher sentences. Less chance to get bail. So these are things within the system that we have to say that we can make better. Canada is the best country in the world, but that does not mean that we have an opportunity to not make it better. I feel that what we should do is we should examine the systems and attempt to move away from saying that we are going to be destructive and destroy systems that are imperfect. All systems are imperfect, and so we need to look at them. We need to look at how we can modify certain institutions, such as our police, how we can modify our education system, how we can modify our criminal justice system so we have better outcomes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Over to you, Mr. O'Toole.
Thank you, Jesus, for the question. It's an important one that many families have been having discussions about, including Rebecca, with our children. We live in the greatest country in the world. And as public officials, it's our commitment to make sure it lives up to the ideals that we want it to be. I think conservatives are actually very well placed to be the champions for this approach, because our inherent principles of rewarding hard work, respect for others, liberty, opportunity, those are at the core of who we are as Conservatives. They actually unite all parts of our movement. So we should unite behind a zero-tolerance approach to any form of racism, anti-Semitism, discrimination. We must make sure we show that we want merit and success to be the best, not the color of someone's skin, not where they've come from, how long they've been in Canada, their faith. We should really make sure we strive to be the Canada that we all know we are, but we need to be always striving to be better. Reconciliation is particularly important. I've said how Justin Trudeau will do symbolic gestures like taking a name of a father of Confederation off a building, but then he'll, on the next day, cancel a pipeline that dozens of Indigenous bands were planning on employment and wealth creation for their people. There was no consultation when he did that with Northern Gateway. What is reconciliation? It needs to be participation, collaboration in the opportunity that is Canada. That's what will happen. That's why, as a private sector lawyer, I volunteered some time on First Nation businesses and opportunities to make sure that reconciliation is a recommitment to our country. I served in the military, and I'll tell you, when someone has your back, you don't care what background they have. It's trust. Your brothers in arms. And that's the approach we should have as Canadians, supporting one another, striving to remain the best country in the world.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. The floor is now open for 7 minutes, candidates. We'll start it off with Mr. McKay.
I think the collaboration aspect of Jesus' question is what we need to come back to, and that is, how do we address some of the problems in our justice system, as Dr. Lewis discussed? How do we get to a place where we're able to have those frank discussions that Mr. O'Toole spoke of? I've had those discussions with my wife, who came to Canada as a child and has experienced racism in her life. We have to address these issues, though, in meaningful ways. The discussions are important. The listening is perhaps more important now than ever before. The saying of walking in somebody's shoes is something we have to be deeply thoughtful about and talk about with our children as well. But it is about stopping it and stamping it out and being intolerant of intolerance. We cannot allow this to exist in our institutions, and the police, quite frankly, have to be a big part of this discussion, because the police are tasked with enforcing our laws. The police are on that proverbial front line. But I do not believe that defunding our police is the answer. I do believe in, of course, support for our social services, making necessary investments in education, having those frank discussions. But our police, let's not forget, heroes like Heidi Stevenson in Nova Scotia, David Wynn in Alberta, they put their lives on the line, much like our armed forces personnel, our first responders who have been dealing with COVID-19. Defunding them has the exact opposite effect of what we need. We need to talk to them. We need to have education about when to use force and the proper exercise of authority. Those will make real differences, Jesus, in your community and in all communities.
But we also have to make sure that we just don't engage in virtue signaling, because the Prime Minister took a knee, and he is the Prime Minister. So he has an ability to make substantive changes. Taking a knee is just a symbol. If he wants to do something about making this country a better place, he can do it. And so I think it's very, very important that we have realistic, real changes. And I don't believe that defunding the police is a realistic option, because these are individuals that run into danger when we're running away from it. And so we need to honor them, and we need to make sure that if there is something wrong with that institution, that we work together as a nation to make sure that we build it up instead of tearing it down.
I agree with Dr. Lewis. It needs real action, and this is where, as public officials, as members of Parliament, we have a role to play to ensure that Canada does live up to the ideals that we want it to be, and real action as opposed to often the symbolism. I think many Canadians who'd watched Justin Trudeau's press conferences months after months after months about staying home, and then he chooses not to follow his own guidance for political reasons, even though the cause is important, is not leadership. He needs to show a substantive commitment to making sure that there's a level playing field, making sure that if there are some groups not represented, that there's opportunity for them to be represented. I saw that firsthand when I was serving in the military. There still needs to be a lot done with respect to gender as well. I saw that in the legal profession when I was there. Not enough women advancing to be partners at large law firms, other things. So I think there's many things we can do, and I agree with Dr. Lewis. It has to be action. You have to demonstrate a plan. It can't be one-time press-related events. It has to be a long-term commitment.
And
I'm just going to cut you off there. Sorry about that. But I just wanted to agree with Dr. Lewis and Peter here about the police forces. And, you know, police brutality is wrong. And I am against the treatment of George Floyd and others who have been treated mercilessly by the police. But these, overall, our police forces, I believe, want to protect our communities. And while they can always improve, I do not approve defunding them. And I, of course, am okay with peaceful demonstrations, but there have been some who have joined in with certain demonstrations in this country, and particularly in the United States, that have promoted violence and promoted looting for the sake of it. And I'm against this form of lawlessness. And for some of these organizations, like Antifa, I would declare them a terrorist organization for their promotion of lawlessness and anarchy.
Yes, and I think that as conservatives, we're in a very unique opportunity because our values support eliminating discrimination. We are the party that believes in equality of outcome. We believe that that outcomes should be systemically equal, and that means that we don't destroy systems. We work to improve them. And we must do that without labels, because I heard from so many Canadians that were so hurt by Justin Trudeau saying that Canadians are racist. Many Canadians have good intent, and they want to work together with their Canadian brothers and sisters and family to make this country a better place. And when we start labeling people negatively, it does not solve anything. So let's look at where the problems really are. We know that some systems have negative outcomes, and so we can work together in fixing those, united as a Canadian family.
And I'll just jump in quickly, and I'm sorry to do that, and I don't know if you misspoke or not, but for me, conservatism is about equality of opportunity. And if we don't see equality of outcome, that is something that we can hope for and wish for. But people will always be different. There will always be people who are a little bit taller, a little bit shorter, do their homework a little bit more, do their homework a little bit less, work harder, don't work quite as hard. And that's why we need a system that is fair to everybody, but respects the fact that time, chance, luck, trying harder, trying less harder, it happens to all of us, and there will be different outcomes in terms of wealth and other outcomes in society. So I wasn't sure if you were talking about that.
I believe that. I believe in personal responsibility. People have to have personal responsibility, and that's not what I'm talking about when we talk about making the systems better. For example, we have to build up the family. The family is there before any child hits an institution. So if we build up the family, we make sure that children are raised with strong values and all the supports that they need, then we have a better chance in those the children getting through these institutions.
Yes, merit and hard work and all of those values that we in the Conservative Party adhere to. But there has to be a recognition, too, of some of the unconscious bias that exists. And we have to work in terms of removing those barriers at any time. We want to see the advancement based on merit, based on inclusion. We want to see that our cultural communities truly feel welcome in our party.
Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. We're going to go to video question number 9.
Hello, I'm Joanne Thibault from Victoria, British Columbia. The Prime Minister has made a series of major rapid-fire decisions to manage Canada through COVID-19. What is one decision that you don't think was well made, and what decision would you have made instead? Thank you.
Mr. Sloan, you're up first. Please go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
This question may have been made for me, as some of you have seen over the last couple of months, but I believe we did a lot of things wrong here. We had, of course, a government which first felt that there was no danger at all in regards to COVID-19. They listened to every single thing that the World Health Organization said, which we now know is compromised by Communist China. And I, of course, believe that we need to defund the World Health Organization completely. We can't have politically motivated organizations giving us advice. And we know that China was cracking down on their own citizens who are trying to spread the alarm about this virus. We know that Taiwan, as an example, and I'm glad that we can say the word Taiwan. I know everyone here will do that, unlike some in the Liberal Party. But Taiwan, of course, took steps very early on to stop travel from affected areas, to test people. And they have had very few cases, under 1,000. They've had, last time I checked, under 10 deaths. And they're 100 miles off the coast of mainland China. So we absolutely should have taken this virus seriously. We should have recommended common sense things like wearing masks or social distancing. I believe if we would have got this early and done our travel bans early from affected areas, we would not have had to do a complete economic shutdown. We cannot afford to do this every 2 years when another virus comes out of China or wherever else it's going to come. We can't afford to do this again. We must make sure that we have testing regimes in place. We must make sure that we have experts who will give us the right advice. We did not have this in this situation, and it is exactly what caused an economic shutdown that ultimately became Justin Trudeau's dream. He gets to hand out money basically for free, and he gets to rise in the polls. Well, his reckoning day is coming. It's coming soon, and we will hit him dead on with what he's done with this, and we're looking at almost maybe $1 trillion in deficit. So,
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Dr. Lewis, please go ahead. 2 minutes.
Thank you for that question. I think it was very important at the outset, even though we were in a crisis situation, to do a costed impact assessment so that we know exactly what the cost is. We have a budget for it, and that is something that is the responsibility of our finance ministers. And I think that there's something very important, because that way we're not saddled with a future tax. I think that we should have closed the borders very, very early, quarantined individuals, repatriate Canadians back to Canada and quarantine them. And we needed to rely on our own data and not the data that came out of China and the WHO. We also needed a better emergency preparedness strategy. And we need to make sure that we do that in the future, having key manufacturing sector to deal with our essential goods, such as our stockpiling of our supplies. They were very low. We want to make sure that we also close the border. The closing of the border was constrained by political correctness. And very early on, I called Justin Trudeau out on that, because I called him out on stating that it was not racist to make a public safety decision for the benefit of Canadians. It was a public safety decision. I also believe that we should have planned for a rainy day. We were running a deficit in times of prosperity. We had 5 years of prosperity where we could have had a surplus, and that way we would not have been going into crisis in such a negative situation. I feel that the modeling was too late, that there was lots of misinformation about masks. Masks should have been worn at an earlier date. We should have shut down travel earlier. We should have looked to other countries like South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, and look at what they were doing and their successes instead of relying solely on China.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. Mr. O'Toole, just to recap, we're talking about COVID-19. What decision did you disagree with, and what would you have done?
Thanks for the question, Joanne. It's a hard one, because just pick one mistake by Justin Trudeau in the COVID-19 crisis. That's hard, but it certainly has to be the travel restrictions. He was ignoring the Conservative Party, which started raising this in January. In February, I put out a detailed plan on how to stop flights from China, Iran, Italy, other countries that had infections, and to actually get the EI system prepared for people that would have to quarantine. By mid-March, Justin Trudeau and Minister Haiju were still telling people there was nothing to worry about and closing the border would have no impact. You know what they did? they made the challenge harder for Premier Ford, Premier Legault, and other premiers across the country who had to respond with the healthcare system. So if the federal government had not botched the travel and quarantining and airports, we'd be much better off like other countries. Their response on both the health crisis and the economic crisis was both slow and confused. They've spent billions more than they needed to because they were late to the game. As I said earlier, 2 years ago in the House, I asked Justin Trudeau about the Chinese manipulation of the World Health Organization. They were excluding Taiwan and other countries from pandemic planning. 2 years ago, we were demanding for Trudeau to get prepared. He was not. In fact, he sent masks and PPE to China as his own officials were telling them there was a crisis descending upon Canada. It's the highest order of failed leadership I've seen in my lifetime as a Canadian. And we will rebuild Canada and get us ready for next time. In my Rebuild Canada plan, we have a plan for resiliency, for self-sufficiency of critical PPE, medical supplies, and to make sure we rebalance trade and relations with other countries. We need to do more amongst the free world. I've been calling for reform of the United Nations for many years. We have to be ready for a potential second wave. I'll be ready as Prime Minister.
Mr. McKay?
Joanne, this is the most important question. And what would have been done differently under a Conservative government, based on everything you've heard here, tells me again that we shouldn't have closed Parliament. Justin Trudeau shouldn't have tried to avoid accountability. But that day is coming, and that day is coming in the next election, and we will see accountability for China as well. But all of these ideas are true. If we had moved quicker on the closing of the borders, if we had moved quicker to get testing in place, if there was a more coordinated effort with the provinces, and in fact, if we had collaborated more with our allies at the very beginning, I believe we wouldn't have been left to rely solely on information that was being funneled through the kidneys of the World Health Organization. We should have looked at the example of countries that did well. Others have mentioned South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore. There were many signals on the horizon that this could happen again. Let's never forget. Let's never forget SARS, H1N1. We should have absolutely been stockpiling and preparing for this. And the advice of sending 16 tons of personal medical equipment, and on that plane, we should have had Michael Korvig and Michael Spavor back, who have now been in custody in China for over 550 days. We could do much better, and we will do much better under Conservative government. All of this advice, all of these ideas could have been fleshed out in Parliament. We could have had committees that allowed these ideas to be coming forward, to be discussed, to be rebutted, and to be debated. Those were the important times. And it was too late for much of the action that came. Yes, the indiscriminate spraying of money into the economy is much different than what we did, albeit in a different time in the recession of 08-09. We took thoughtful steps. We entered that period with a balanced budget, and we emerged stronger. We were able to get back to a balanced budget, which seems so long ago. But human health and economic health require an all-hands-on-deck approach now. And that's what you're seeing discussed in this debate. That's what you're seeing Conservatives come forward with. Thoughtful, forward-looking, and positive improvements to our system and to our country.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. The floor is now open for 7 minutes.
Okay, well, thank you. I just want to add here, there's a lot of civil liberties issues that are at stake here as well. And one of the questions that I get most frequently from, literally this is the most frequent question I get from Conservative members across the country, is whether I support mandatory vaccines. And this is a question that we're seeing thrown around in different places. We're seeing Canada team up with a company in China that's affiliated with the Chinese military. You know, I don't blame someone for being skeptical about that sort of alliance with a company in China, and I would never support mandatory vaccinations for Canadians. We also have issues with some legislators that want to track people's movements when they're not in quarantine. One other big issue that I have an issue with is social media censorship. And we see companies like YouTube saying, well, you know, if you put out a video that disagrees with government advice on a pandemic, well, we're going to pull it down. Well, excuse me, we could have had videos advising wearing masks, advising travel bans pulled down because of our Liberal government's flip-flops. It is important that ideas can get out there. Public authorities can be wrong. Let me say that. The World Health Organization, other people of authority can be wrong. We believe that as Conservatives. We always must question the government. Now, does that mean that that we need to believe all the all the different things that we hear? No, not necessarily. But it's a free society, and we cannot We cannot allow these social media companies to distort the truth. And we had great videos pointing out the origins of the virus and different types of things, even skeptical of different ways of counting that were pulled, and I'm against that, full stop.
Sharing of information is absolutely important, and we can do so at the speed of light now. We have the capacity to share information, which is why we should have been looking for other sources, not relying solely on the World Health Organization. We have an opportunity as a country now to brace ourselves if there is a second wave. But it also means taking steps to improve our economy, to pay for the necessities that Canadians will need in the future, to open up the jobs, to get people off a government assistance program and back into the workforce, to take full advantage of the advantages that we enjoy in this country, our massive natural resource capacity. The world is going to need food and it's going to need energy. And we have ample of both, and we can take care of our own people and also provide those necessities of life in other parts of the world, which will help in so many other ways. It'll help with the environment, it'll help with human health, lowering greenhouse gas emissions, partnering with countries who need our help, who are relying on us. This is also part of our responsibility to try to stop the outbreak of these pandemics where and when we find them. We have been a country that has been at the forefront of being a generous, thoughtful nation. We should have Taiwan in the World Health Organization, not standing in their way. We should be effectively advocating at the United Nations, not pandering to them. And frankly, we don't have time to try to reform the United Nations, as suggested by Mr. O'Toole. We need to actually reform our economy, work in ways that we're going to be able to feed our people, employ our people,
by holding
work
your
together
money
to
back.
make our country
We're
stronger
gonna let-
now.
I'm going to let Mr. O'Toole respond to the comment made
Mr.
about
McKay,
him.
I've been saying for 4 years you reform the United Nations by holding your money back. Other countries are starting to do that. I've seen UN failures on peacekeeping. We've had Canadian peacekeepers hurt mentally from UN corruption. Remember Rwanda. We've seen the World Health Organization corrupted. We've seen trading and scandals of corruption within the UN. The free countries of the world need to unite and say, we're no longer going to let the bad actors of the world run these institutions. We have to reform them. We've heard leadership from Australia on this, but Justin Trudeau was so obsessed with his vanity project for a Security Council seat that he put his own personal interest ahead of the national interest. So, Mr. McKay, we need Canadian leadership now on the world stage. We need to restore our reputation. I've served our country overseas with our Navy and with our allies. Canadian leadership is needed to make these institutions better so they're not corrupt, so the world is ready next time.
And I've
So,
demonstrated
Mr.
that
McKay,
leadership in
We're going to go to Dr. Lewis.
Speaking directly.
Dr. Lewis.
I believe that we have to look within. I believe that we should never again be in a situation where we are unprepared. That's why it's important for us to develop our manufacturing capacity, and we need an emergency preparedness strategy so that we are never found in this position again. We need to make sure that governments are responsible for our health and safety, and that they're in a position where we have confidence in their planning ability. We should not be caught off guard again, and we need to rediscover our manufacturing sector. And that's why we need to provide tax incentives for companies to be able to produce these essential equipment like respirators, like gloves, like masks. Those things should be produced within our country.
And Dr.
And
Lewis,
if we do
could I
not
just
have
add
those
something?
companies,
Also
we
reform
have to make
the
sure
World
that
Trade
we
Organization.
have
I agree
the
with you.
Thank you, Dr.
enabling
Lewis.
capacity.
We're going to go to
agree with you,
Mr.
Dr.
Sloan.
Lewis.
It's going to
Okay,
Mr. Sloan and then Mr. O'Toole.
And I'm glad you raised essential service, because I was thinking of one myself. I was so sick of the fact that there was hundreds of people in Walmart, people out demonstrating, and yet our churches were closed. Churches, I think we can all agree, should be an essential service, and we need to get our churches open so that we can get back to worshiping like before. Thank you.
Mr. O'Toole.
I agree with you, Dr. Lewis. We can also reform the World Trade Organization so that bad actors like China aren't dumping steel and aluminum and displacing good Canadian jobs in Hamilton, in Kitimat, BC, in the Saguenay region of Quebec. We should be partnering to have free trade amongst free countries. Mr. McKay seems okay with the status quo, not demanding better from the WTO, not demanding better from the UN. This is why it's time for a next generation of true blue leadership to make these institutions better, hold people to account, and don't allow bad actors of the world to game them.
Okay,
That's
Mr.
what
McKay,
happened with
you
the
can respond.
WHO.
You
Well,
can
we need
respond.
thoughtful ideas, and you're seeing a lot of this tonight. And it happens for us as a party when we're able to not attack each other, but attack the Liberals and focus our attention on presenting ideas. I agree with Dr. Lewis's discussion around manufacturing, and we need to ensure that we're encouraging Canadians to buy Canadian, to move in the direction of traveling more in Canada, to embracing manufacturing. Yes, certainly our tax system needs to be reformed. It's been 50 years since we had meaningful tax reform. We need to bring government finances
And Jack
back under
Mintz
control,
just
as the way we
complimented
did
my
when
tax
we were in
reform
government,
proposal.
as the way
Our
we
top
used a
economist
deficit reduction
just-
plan. I didn't
just
interrupt you,
supported
Mr.
my
O'Toole.
program.
When we had meaningful deficit reduction action, and Ms. Raitt was there as well, we made changes that brought government spending back under control. That will be needed in a post-COVID-19
Thank
world.
you. Thank you very much, Mr. McKay. Dragging the moderator into the debate is not a smooth move, by the way. Candidates, we are now moving on to the 10th question, which you think is the last question, but we're throwing a little curveball at you tonight. There will be an 11th question, so don't put away your notes right away. We're going to move to the 10th question, please.
My name is Toye from Edmonton, and my question to the leadership candidate is, what are your strategies to increase the party base, especially considering the millennials and the minority group? Thank you.
Dr. Lewis, this one's to you first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you for your question. I believe that we need to expand our big blue tent, and we need to respect diversity of thought so that we can bring in new people into our party. We need to diversify, bring in new immigrants, reach out to young people, bring back the social conservatives, progressive conservatives, fiscal conservatives, libertarians, people who have left to the PPC party, bring them back in. And I feel that we need to focus on broadening our supporter base, looking at the urban centers, making sure that we can reach out to new immigrants, that we can reach out to people of color, and that we can bring them into the party. I'm the person that can do that. I feel that we also have to focus on our environment, because many people I have heard did not warm up to our party because of our environmental policies. I feel that our unity is our strength. I feel that we need to also focus on individuals who have left the party and who have gone to the other parties, such as the Green Party or the PPC. We need to bring those individuals back, and we need to reach out to diverse communities. I'm the only individual that I've worked in diverse communities on the grounds, in the grassroots, in urban centers, and I understand what it is to reach out to those communities. In 2015, when I ran in Scarborough Rouge Park, I had to bring in people from the most diverse riding in the country in a 4-week period. And I did that by reaching out, going, talking to people, relating to them, making sure that we go to the temples, we go to the synagogues, we go to the churches, we go to the community centers, and communicating with people in their niche, in their communities.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Mr. O'Toole, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you, Tui, for the question. And I agree with a lot of what Dr. Lewis said and look forward to working with her on that, as all Conservatives look to invite more young people into our movement and new first-time voting Conservatives. That's what I think we really need to do, particularly in the suburbs and cities of the country. I've won in the Greater Toronto area 3 times with an approach of building a great team and bringing new people who'd never voted Conservative. I also think we can bring former NDP voters because they don't stand up for hardworking families anymore. They're social justice movements. NDP members were supporting the illegal blockades. So if you want to work and build this great country, you're welcome in our movement. Whether you've not voted for us before, whether you're a first-time voter, we have to reach out. I'm very proud that all the MPs under 40, or almost all of the MPs under 40 in our caucus, are supporting me and this vision to build and reach out with the party. And I'll tell you, young people and a lot of Canadians are getting tired of a Prime Minister who's all about socks and selfies. That doesn't help a small business owner in Brampton or Surrey who didn't qualify for some of the COVID plans the Trudeau government was late with and are now struggling on the edge of bankruptcy. That doesn't help Justin Trudeau's vanity projects, a student with increasing debt and now with high unemployment rates as a result of COVID-19. We have to show that a Conservative approach with ideas for the future and making sure people see themselves reflected in our commitment to liberty, equality, family, a strong Canada at home and around the world, I will make sure we grow our movement to win. That is what is key. And part of it is having a platform that takes the environment seriously, that shows we can balance building pipelines while respecting programs our provincial partners are doing on the environment, respect for human rights, a strong Canada at home and around the world. My Our Country plan has it all. Go to my website to see it all.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. McKay, please go ahead. 2 minutes.
Boy, thank you so much for the question. And it really is a come one, come all. I don't think it's targeting groups. I don't think it's targeting other parties. I think it's demonstrating that we are a party open to new ideas. We are a party of solutions, a party with great history and attachment for having built this country, but a party that has always had an open door. The big blue tent is the perfect analogy, but we need to push those tent pegs out a little further so the Canadians feel welcome inside, so that they sense that we do, in fact, have real substantive plans to protect the environment, as we did previously with an acid rain treaty, as we did in protecting internal waters, as we did as a party when we were last in government, in protecting the Arctic, in protecting our borders and our approaches, in building this country in meaningful ways. And I have a plan that does just that, an 8-point plan that goes specific to the challenges that will be there post-COVID-19 in improving our economy. And that is where Conservatives do coalesce. We come together around the ideas of opportunity, of inclusion, of having the really difficult discussions as we've had tonight, as we have at our policy conventions, when we come together and we make decisions and we hash it out around the kitchen table, the way we do in the country, the way we do in the city. We want to be able to demonstrate in meaningful ways that everyone has a place in the Conservative Party, just as everyone has a place in Canada. Our young participant here tonight that asked us about why we wanted to be Prime Minister, that's why I want to be, I know it's Max, that's why we wanted to build this country for him, for my children, for everyone. Everyone on this stage is a parent. And that is what motivates us to leave the country better than we found it, as our parents did. And so, Tway, this is very much my vision, to make sure that our country is strong, to make sure that our economy is functioning, to make sure that we're reputable in the world, that we stand behind what we say, that we get results. That is what is going to open our party up to forming government again.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan.
Well, this question is what has motivated me in this leadership race, and it's something I've thought about significantly throughout the last election and leading up until today. And I believe it comes down to several things. The Conservative Party has to be known to be the party that has answers to every question that's facing Canadians. We can't just focus on the economy and liberal corruption. We need to have good conservative answers to housing, to poverty, to drug addiction. Young people like to do things. They like to do good. And if we can have plans that address these things in a conservative way, we don't need to borrow from the Liberals. We can have good conservative ways to actually reach out and help the crises we're seeing in society, whether it's the opioid addiction, whether it's our housing crisis. We can have good conservative answers to these. And when it comes to the environment, you know, we had a great environmental plan in our last election, and, you know, our marketing strategy was kind of like, you know, we're not going to say much about it. We're going to say that we have it. We need to distinguish our plan from the Liberal style of plan. Conservatives are not climate alarmists. Okay? We are good conservationists, and we need to say this is a great conservationist plan. It will actually help the environment. It is not going to deal with, you know, some random taxation scheme. It will actually be good for our environment. And that is how we can sell it. Free speech is a big seller for our younger generation. Look at Jordan Peterson. His opposition to Bill C-16, which I am also against, raised him into the stratosphere in terms of popularity with primarily young people. These are things that we should take seriously. Free speech in universities. I am behind a free speech plan in universities, and I would make funding contingent on rigid protection for free speech and free inquiry at our universities. And I've mentioned my social media plan. We're going to take them to task for banning people who may be conservative or have different ideas. I will take them to task for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We now have the floor open for 7 minutes. Candidates, please go ahead.
I'm the only person here with a Master's of Environmental Studies, and I believe that the environment is a very, very critical part of our platform, of our ability to win the next election. And with the education in environmental studies, I have an authenticity that I offer and that Canadians can see because I've taken the time to get educated on this very, very important issue. I also have private sector business experience, and I realize that the anti-business policies that this government has pushed over the last 5 years, it is turning off a lot of business owners. We know that small and medium-sized businesses employ over 80% of the Canadian population, and so we need strong business policies that promote the businesses.
I agree with what Mr. McKay said about we're all here as parents for our children. And the environment is critical for our children and for voters. If we want to win in the suburbs of Canada next time, we have to have a real plan. I'm the only one that has a detailed, real plan, and I will work and partner with the provinces, like Premier Kenney, like Premier Ford. And it's been disappointing to see Mr. McKay attack that. We need to collaborate. The provinces are closer to their own economies. We saw how the carbon tax was unconstitutional according to a court in Alberta. I've been against the carbon tax since I was elected. I worked for a private sector employer that is leaving Canada before I was in politics because of the carbon tax. There are no carbon prices for states that we compete against. So the Trudeau government has made us less competitive, particularly manufacturing here in Southern Ontario. So I'm totally against the carbon tax, but I will support provinces that have an approach to get emissions down by working with large emitters. Mr. McKay has supported a large emitter program before. Now he doesn't. If we're not clear on the environment in the next election, being a serious issue, we're not going to be able to get the pipelines built. We're not going to be able to get projects built in the north, our mines. We're not going to be able to partner with Indigenous and Inuit communities to bring Canadian resources to market. The most ethical, highest standards of legal, environmental, and Indigenous engagement in the world. Canadian resources should be the standard for the free world.
Mr. McKay, would you like to respond?
Thank you very much.
Mr. McKay is going to respond.
Thank you, Lisa. Well, look, my plan not only involves environmental stewardship, which I think we all agree on, but also a plan to create jobs. It speaks of replacing coal as a source of energy. We have provinces, including my own in Nova Scotia, that still burn coal, and yet we're bringing energy into Canada, which is completely counterintuitive. We need to be making investments in carbon sequestration. We need to achieve further advancements in technology, but how do we pay for it? We pay for it by the export of clean, highly regulated, competitively priced oil and gas products that we can refine in New Brunswick and not have to bring it around the entire continent through the Panama Canal. We absolutely need to be able to transport our energy, including hydroelectricity, out of the province of Quebec. To do that, we have to have meaningful consultation with provinces, with the private sector, with the Indigenous people of this country, and we need to get it done. We need to replace our dependence on any type of foreign energy and use the natural resources that we have at our fingertips, at our availability, that will create jobs, that will drive our economy forward, that will get people back to work in a post-COVID-19 world. But look, there's only one person on this stage who's talking about, and I quote, forging a national industrial regulatory and pricing regime across the country. That's Mr. O'Toole. It's in his document. He's tried to now withdraw it. He's also talked about how we are subsidizing the energy industry.
About what Mr. McKay, you raised an
Candidates.
issue, and I do have concerns about that because the national regulatory pricing system, it does seem like it is a double tax, and in provinces like Alberta that is already paying a tax at the provincial level, this seems like an additional tax.
I'm glad you asked that question,
I also
Dr.
have
Lewis.
problems with your policy because you have given a 100% capital cost allowance to the manufacturing sector. What about the oil and gas sector? Why haven't you given that same capital cost allowance to the oil and gas sector?
Well, they are manufacturing, Dr. Lewis, and so
Mr.
of course they
O'Toole.
would be eligible as
Thank
well.
you.
Mr.
Dr.
O'Toole,
Lewis,
please.
I'm glad you've asked about this. My approach will respect provincial plans. I find it stunning that Mr. McKay would suggest he would not support a plan put forward by Premier Kenney with respect to large emitters or
I've never
Premier
said that.
Ford where we're standing. That is exactly what you're suggesting, Mr. McKay.
I'm just gonna
My
jump in
approach
here.
to collaborate with provinces, they know their economies better than some bureaucroat in Ottawa.
Except
so
Mr.
we need
Sloan.
to
through
make
Quebec
sure
without
Thank you.
consultation,
we have
which
no
is what your
federal
plan
carbon
calls
tax.
for, Mr.
and we
Candidates,
get
I'm
our
going to Mr.
emissions down.
Sloan right now. Mr. Sloan.
I'm
And
going
then
to
back
just
to
change
Mr.
the
McKay.
direction briefly here. We only have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to say we have to also address certain things that happen within the party as well. And, you know, one thing that I believe sends people away, especially young people from the party, is when they feel that somehow the game is fixed. And I believe that our party is more open and fair and free than any of the other parties that exist right now. But I just want to say that I am 100% in favor of open and fair nominations. I won't be disqualifying anybody. I won't be putting any of my best buddies or my cronies in positions. It's up to the local members to decide. When it comes to leadership races, we've seen certain candidates get kicked out, Richard Decarie, Jim Karahalios. I'm against that. I believe it's up to the members to decide, and all of us here should be in favor of that. And I've heard, you know, different rumors about different people, and I don't know, Mr. McKay, could you answer me on this? Will you allow for open and free nominations in the nomination process?
Our party has a long tradition of respecting the democratic will of the membership. That's why we have these conventions. That's why we have these leadership debates. That's why we are the party that people turn to in times of crisis. And yes, we want to have open nominations. Yes, as a leader, I would give the money back to our riding associations so they can be more competitive. We can win more seats in this country. We can turn to the grassroots of this party and empower them. That has somehow slipped away in recent years. We have to get back to empowering the membership to make those decisions. When we are able to select good, strong local candidates, that's when we win those seats. That's what will allow us to form the government, to replace Justin Trudeau, and I know that that's something we all agree on in this stage. We need to be a party that absolutely embraces democracy and doesn't admire the basic dictatorship of China.
Respect the whole movement,
Thank you
Mr. McKay.
very much, candidates. That concludes question 10. So the bonus question that I'd mentioned earlier is this. On July 1st, the Canada-US-Mexico Free Trade Agreement comes into force. There's $2 billion a day that crosses our border, and that makes the United States Canada's most important trade partner. How would you work with this U.S. administration and the next U.S. administration? And we are starting with Mr. O'Toole. 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. An important question because the Trudeau government got the new NAFTA negotiations wrong. We all remember when the Trudeau government suggested they would be open to reopening NAFTA when the new U.S. administration was really looking at concerns with Mexico. They then put forward the so-called progressive agenda, where Mr. Trudeau put his election platform, things like climate change, reconciliation, into trade negotiations with the U.S., even though those topics would never form part of a negotiation. Mexico took the negotiations seriously and got better results. Here's why. This new deal hurts the Kitimat refining aluminum in BC and in the Saguenay because it's allowing Mexico to bring in trans-shipped aluminum. And with more auto parts being built with aluminum, this is going to help Mexico and hurt Canada both from a steel and aluminum standpoint and an auto parts, jobs in Ontario. This was a huge failure of the Trudeau government, and it needs to be addressed. I've raised some of it in the House before. When I went down to Washington and helped get the tariffs removed, the steel and aluminum, I met with a U.S. Congressman, Dan Crenshaw, Navy SEAL who had lost his eye serving overseas. We made a connection because we had both served with our respective countries' militaries. That's how I started forging relations on Capitol Hill, based on our shared security, our shared interest, our shared history. That's why I've suggested that we get into the ballistic missile program and make sure that NORAD, our national security alliance with the U.S., means that we take security, trade, and foreign relations in step so that we can reform World Trade Organization measures, reform institutions that are being gamed against us. So the new NAFTA, we're going to have to fix a lot of the huge mistakes of the Trudeau government, particularly for working families in steel, auto, and aluminum.
Thank you, Mr. O'Toole. Mr. McKay, 90 seconds. Oh,
Thank
sorry,
you.
Mr. McKay, 2 minutes.
We survived the NAFTA negotiation. The new USMCA has actually left Canada poorer than it was before. We have made concessions when it came to supply management. We have made concessions with respect to aluminum, as was mentioned, intellectual property. We have opened ourselves up to vulnerability. In fact, we have even foregone some of our sovereignty by suggesting that if Canada is to pursue a new free trade agreement with Great Britain, for example, we will have to get approval from the United States or pay a potential price. So when Chrystia Freeland and the Prime Minister said it was going to be a win-win-win, it was for the United States. And so, yes, there will be opportunities in the future to perhaps fix some of those misgivings. But look, it does require the ability to work with our most trusted and important trading partner. It does involve having the ability to go to the United States, as I have on numerous occasions, to meet with counterparts when I served in the government of Stephen Harper. To get things done, you have to take an approach that isn't insulting, that isn't confrontational, that isn't seen as speaking behind somebody's back on the world stage, as we saw Mr. Trudeau do. Those type of behaviors don't advance Canada's interests. We need to talk about what matters to the Americans. Yes, it's North American security. We should talk to them about a North American approach to protecting our environment and lowering greenhouse gas emissions. We need to take that constructive, conservative approach to get things done. And being constructive means working with everyone, reaching out across the aisle. I was happy to help Mr. O'Toole get some of those meetings and try to help secure meetings when he was there because I believed in what he was doing. We have to believe in one another as a party and as a government to get the best results for Canadians. That's what we were able to do when we were last in government, and that's what we'll do again to forge a better, safer, more productive, and more prosperous country for all Canadians. If we're able to do that with our closest partners, if we're able to do it with countries whose values we share, we all benefit.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan.
What a great question. And, you know, I think the first step, as was said by Peter McKay here, we shouldn't insult the President of the United States when we're the Prime Minister of Canada. And, you know, we saw Justin Trudeau act like an absolute child when dealing with a very shrewd and capable negotiator. And now, I mean, with the United States on our side, there is nothing we can't accomplish. Do you think if the United States really wanted to help us out with getting the two Michaels home, they couldn't make it happen? Donald Trump will not lift a finger to help Justin Trudeau because of what he's done. We need to take our closest allies seriously. We need to forge an excellent relationship with them. We need to work with them to constrain China. We need to work with them. Aaron O'Toole has spoken about free and fair trade with like-minded countries. What a great example. They're right there waiting for us. We can deal with them to make many things happen. And another thing we need to do is we need to start pulling our weight when it comes to NATO. We need to up our military spending to our NATO commitments. And I will do that. I'll do it within 5 years. If we are pulling our weight and we're not seeing as just, you know, dragging on their support because we happen to live beside them, maybe they'll be willing to work together with us. Maybe they'll be willing to help us when it comes to exerting pressure on other countries. They are our greatest ally, and we, under this next government, which will be a conservative government, I know our relationship with the United States will be restored, and I'll go so far as to say I am confident that Donald Trump will defy the odds again and be the next administration. And when I am leader of the Conservative Party, I will give him a call and congratulate him.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Dr. Lewis.
Thank you. So I feel that good foreign policy begins at home. We need good, strong domestic policy. And so we need a good, strong national purpose and values. And that means we need to get our own house in order first. We have to look at the top threats to our national security. And that is, we have to look at our Canadian identity, our sovereignty, our economy, our fundamental democratic values, and our respect for in the international arena will improve. I also feel that we have to look at the unfair trade practices that we've seen, and we have transitioned from an amicable trade partner to an adversarial trade partner with many countries, and COVID has brought home that reality. Another reality that COVID has brought home is just that we cannot rely on any country, even our allies, because when it came to things such as respirators, which were essential, Mr. Trump decided that he was going to keep it for his own people. And that's a decision that he could make. But I never want to be placed in that decision again, where we are relying on our ally. We think that they will be there for us, and they fail us. And so what we need to do is we need to look at some of the U.S. protectionism mechanisms that they have in place, and we need to renegotiate our agreements on certain issues. And it doesn't matter who the president is, whether it's Donald Trump or someone else. We need to approach the president of the United States with respect, and we can build amicable trade relations and build bridges and restore the relationship with our best and strongest ally.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. 7 minutes now for open debate on Canada-U.S. relations.
The Trudeau Liberals missed the boat on NAFTA, and they know that. Mexico got a better deal, so my new government, we will have to address the shortcomings in the NAFTA agreement. I worked on trade in the private sector and in government. We're also AWOL right now. The UK, Australia, and New Zealand, three of our closest allies, are talking about a free trade agreement. I've been talking about a CANZUC proposal with those countries to do more security partnership, exchanges with our military. I served alongside Kiwis, Australians, Brits. We need to do more with our closest allies. That is happening right now, and Justin Trudeau is AWOL, just coming off his failed UN bid. And this new NAFTA, Mr. McKay, it doesn't restrict a trade agreement with a country like Great Britain or the UK. It's non-market economies. Why they added that to the deal was because the Trudeau government was too close to the Communist Party of China. They approved the ONET transaction. They approved the Hytera transaction, which was putting security of our Five Eyes at risk. So that's why the U.S. were so worried about the Trudeau pivot to China that they inserted that in there. It was a deviation of our sovereignty that I don't agree with, but it shows that our allies don't trust the judgment of the Trudeau government. Having served alongside our allies, they will trust an O'Toole government to get our national interest back on track, both from trade, commerce, and our role in the world. We need to restore our reputation.
We need to absolutely look for new trade agreements and new opportunities for Canadian products to be sent abroad, to bring that return on investment back to Canada, to create jobs here, to create wealth and prosperity. And we need to demonstrate that we are a country that's serious. We're a country that cares about global security. We're a country that contributes to it. We are now number 20 out of 28 countries in NATO. We have seen our commitments decline when it comes to our military. We are at our lowest number of deployed Canadians in decades. And we're hearkening back to an era that was known as the Decade of Darkness by serving personnel. And yes, I congratulate Mr. O'Toole on his service. I served in a different way. I served our men and women in uniform as their defense minister for 6 years. I was proud to sit at NATO tables and to talk about how we were going to make contributions, to see our men and women do magnificent work as they did going to Haiti and responding to the emergency there, as they did in a very difficult mission in Afghanistan. And of course, we need to work with countries like the United States, but others as well. Others who believe in our country. We need to protect our Arctic sovereignty, and we need to do that in negotiation with the United States. Having a military that's ready to not only protect our borders, but also the away game and contribute to international peace and order and a restoration of global security, that's the country, that's the Canada, that's the military that we need. And America respects that, as do our closest allies, including the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. Having sat at those NATO tables as minister and having traveled as foreign minister, seeing how other countries respect Canada and turn to Canada and look to us, and having that diminished under Justin Trudeau was one of the saddest things that we've experienced in the last 5 years. We're no longer seen as that trusted, reliable ally, and that's why we need to get back to building our military capability and protecting our own sovereignty first.
Mr. Sloan, Mr. Sloan.
Thank you. You know, I agree with what you're saying, Peter, and I like the CANZUC proposal. I think it's good, but I think we have to remember that our primary ally, our closest ally, should be the United States. And the other countries that you mentioned, they're great, but the closeness, the historical ties that we share have to be prioritized for us. And with the United States as our good friend, as they have always been, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. I agree with expanding our trade to these other countries, but it cannot be at the expense of having the best relationship with the United States that we have had in many decades.
You know, Dr. Lewis is next.
Okay.
I'm very concerned because I hear that Mr. McKay and Mr. O'Toole, they're talking about NATO and they've committed to 2% spending and making sure that they meet that commitment. But while they were both in the defense positions for our government, that they never reached that spending level. And I'm curious as to why.
The recession of 08-09 is essentially the answer.
Well, we have COVID now. We have much greater problems than the recession of 2009. So why should Canadians believe that promise?
Well, it's going to move over time in that direction as our economy grows, as we're able to enable the investments that are required. We made great steps, Dr. Lewis, with great respect, to reach that potential. And in fact, we had made that commitment as a government fully at the meetings in NATO, in the UK. We were able to do so because countries believed in us. But yes, the United States is asking us to do so, and we need to see that more collaborative approach in working with our NATO allies to get there and encouraging others to do the same. But we're going in the exact opposite direction right now under Justin Trudeau.
Mr. O'Toole.
I often say that someone should tell Justin Trudeau that Vimy Ridge was not a peacekeeping operation for the United Nations. We've always stood up for values and our allies from our earliest days as a country. That's why when I was in Washington laying a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier, they were expressing their condolences for the recent killing at that time of Nathan Cirillo. Those binds between our countries are important, and they are a way to repair the relationship damaged by Justin Trudeau. In Arlington, there was a cross erected for Americans that died serving with Canadian units in World War I. Those bonds are very important, and we need to use our deep personal, historic, trade, and security relations to not only improve relations, trade, and relations in North America, we need to do this around the world to realign trade and other institutions that have been gamed by bad actors, as I said, and make sure that the free countries of the world set the rules of the game. We don't let
Mr.
bad
O'Toole,
actors.
I'm really concerned about you opening up the TPP to have discussions with Australia and New Zealand. I'm concerned about that on our supply management chain.
The TPP is already finished, so those elements would not be looked at in CANZUK. CANZUK
That's
is
the
about
only
allowing,
element that we have not dealt with, though. We have not negotiated the supply management, Mr.
It's
O'Toole.
about allowing students to study there and then work there for a number of years, and vice versa. We should show that close allies, democracies, free countries do more together.
But it's
at
about
a time
committing
where
to our
the
agriculture
UN
sector
and bad
that we
actors,
won't make
we
other
need
concessions.
our closest
That
allies
we
to
will
compensate
compensate for those
together.
concessions
Absolutely.
if they do occur. And if there is new free trade agreements, we need to make those type of priorities and commitments to our supply managed system.
Thank you very much, candidate. That concludes the debate portion of tonight's event. Thank you very much. It was very spirited and very well managed as well. Before I ask the candidates to provide their closing remarks, I want to acknowledge that earlier this evening I made a flippant remark in response to a candidate which singled out a specific candidate, and I wanted to apologize to the candidate for doing so. With that, Mr. O'Toole, you have 90 seconds for your closing remarks.
Friends, I'm running because I believe in this party. I'm running because I believe that whether you're a fiscal or a social conservative, a libertarian or a defense hawk, whether you've been in Canada 5 minutes or 50 years, whether you're LGBTQ, straight, young, or old, whether you worship on Saturdays, Sundays, every day, or not at all, you are an important part of this country, and there's a place for you in the Conservative Party of Canada. I will be a champion for the Conservative Party and fight back against those who try to define us. And as for the attacks on me, the Liberals will be even tougher on us, but I can take it. You can't scare me. I used to fly on Sea King helicopters. Conservatives have a choice to make. Either you believe that we can score on an empty net by acting more like Liberals, or you believe, like I do, that we can win when we unite every kind of conservative. We will win when we boldly confront the Liberals and offer a positive, principled, conservative alternative for our country. I'm asking for your support and for your help. I need your vote to take on and beat Justin Trudeau so we can get our country back on track and deliver a Canada built on liberty, respect, and opportunity. I'm Aaron O'Toole, and I'm running to be the Prime Minister.
Mr. McKay, 90 seconds for your close.
We are a great party that has done much of the heavy lifting over Canada's history. And today there is much to do to overcome COVID-19. When I co-founded the Conservative Party of Canada, we had lost 3 elections. We needed to be strong and united to win, and we did. I won 6 elections and served in cabinet for almost 10 years, where we built a stronger, safer, and more prosperous Canada, where the rule of law was protected. A government that responded to a global recession and returned the books to balance. Whether it was representing Canada abroad, supporting the troops, I never drifted from my rural roots. That's where I learned the values of hard work, being careful with the dollar, standing up for what's just, respecting those who keep our country safe and free, and helping those who are less fortunate. I have continued to serve charitable organizations during my time in the private sector. But we have seen a nation fall behind under the failed policies of Justin Trudeau. I believe we owe it to our children and to our grandchildren to leave a better Canada. And this happens when Conservatives unite and offer Canadians hope and a plan for the future, and we win together. I encourage you to visit my website, petermackay.ca, to read more about my vision, including the 8-point jobs plan for Canada. We have heard some good ideas tonight from all of the candidates, and we have a long road ahead of us. But I will build a team that is ready to beat Justin Trudeau in every part of Canada. I ask for your support. Please join me to build a better Canada.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Mr. Sloan, you have 90 seconds.
It is a privilege to be here tonight representing the grassroots of this great movement. We have two choices in facing the future of our party. The first is to water down our values and hope for electoral success. The other is to stand true to principle. The other candidates might agree with me so far, but there is a clear difference. I am the only candidate who will pull us out of the Paris Agreement. I am the only candidate who will defund the World Health Organization. I am the only candidate actively campaigning for free speech and parental sovereignty against the draconian bills C-16 and Bill C-8. I am the only candidate who would declare Antifa a terrorist group. I am the only candidate who will stand against climate alarmism, stand against the UN and her sovereignty-destroying sister organizations like the World Health Organization, and to stand strong against political correctness. Our success lies in a firm commitment to conservative values. I will do whatever it takes to unite our country, to unite our movement, to defend our sovereignty, and to make sure that the West feels like an equal partner in Confederation. I will never compromise on principles. I will never retreat. This is my promise to you and to Canada. If you don't want a Liberal light party, I am your candidate. If you want a Conservative without apology to lead our party, I ask tonight for your vote. God bless you, and God bless Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Dr. Lewis, 90 seconds.
My parents left everything behind to come to this great country because they believed that it was the best country in the world to raise their children. And I know that they were right. I am proud to be a Canadian. Canada has shaped me and has made me everything that I am today and has given me this opportunity to stand here before you tonight to seek the position of the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and potentially your next Prime Minister. Over the last 5 years, I've watched Justin Trudeau destroy the Canadian dream. The fabric of our nation is being torn apart. Provinces are threatening to leave our great confederation. Debt is piling up. Social divisions are widening. But there is hope. Hope that Canada can be restored as a beacon of hope and opportunity for all around the world. I believe that when Conservatives unite, social conservatives, progressive conservatives, libertarian and fiscal conservatives, we can start the work of healing this great nation. COVID has pushed us to a turning point, but it is not the end. It is just the beginning of a stronger, more independent and self-sufficient nation, relying on our own manufacturing capacity, our own national resources. We can unite with the passion and the love and the freedom that knows that when we work together, there's nothing we cannot achieve. Our unity is indeed our strength.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lewis. And thank you to all the candidates as this concludes our event. As a reminder to the media, candidates will be available in this studio starting in about 10 minutes for questions. I'd like to thank everybody at home who spent the time to watch our candidates discuss incredibly important issues to the Canadian public. I want to wish the candidates all the best of luck as this race continues, and I want to thank you very much for your service to our country. Have a good night.